Thank you. And then adoption of the meeting minutes from our previous meeting, which was March 30th of this year. If anybody's had any comments on that or had a chance to review those minutes, I have, and I don't have anything to add. But anybody else? No?
No.
Can we get a mover on that if possible?
Second.
Cooper, first, got a seconder? David, second. So all in favor for adoption of the minutes? Good to go. Public comment stuff. Do we have any public on the? Nope. Okay, we'll move along. So no business. It looks like Kristen is up.
I think I'll defer to Patrick to maybe give a little bit of the history and the background about what's happened over the summer. I think that's all important to kind of discuss that publicly first. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Patrick.
Okay, so this past summer, we've had some issues with the outfall from the wastewater treatment plant. There was 3 instances where it had to be inspected and then repaired after breakages at various points along the outfall. The most recent issue was they found that the pipe was twisted up so much that it wasn't really repairable and had to be cut off about 2/3 of the way out to its former terminus. And that's where it's operating currently. So it's not actually meeting our requirements under the BC Environmental Management Act and the terms of our permit to discharge. So in looking at, and overall, I mean, it cost about $55,000 with the various call outs that had to be made and getting the divers out, inspecting and repairing the pipe. So it's costly. It's an ongoing cost to have a outfall in this condition. It's smaller than it should be. You're probably aware that it operates as a force main. So essentially all the wastewater has to be pumped. The preferred operation would be as a gravity discharge. And so a new outfall is what we're recommending, rather than trying to retrofit and repair the existing outfall, which is believe was installed based on the drawings that we have in 89. So it's close to 35 years old. You know, it's not that old, but it's there are signs that it's at the end of its life. We did have a preliminary design and a corresponding environmental impact study for a new outfall done as part of the preliminary design work for the wastewater treatment plant upgrading that was done in 2022. And so we do have, and we've approached the consultant that we were working with on that, Great Pacific, and they've provided fee proposal and overall estimate for cost of replacing the marine outfall. The total cost, including all of the design work and permitting and cost escalation that's gone on since 2022 and is expected to continue. It's about a $1.2 million project. It makes most sense if we replace the outfall to a standard and size that could accommodate what we expect future growth to be. It's not really that much different. The bulk of the cost is the capital replacement of the pipe itself, upsizing it from, in this case, upsizing from an 8-inch to a 10-inch pipe isn't a huge cost. It's about $100,000 of the 1.2 million. So, you know, it leaves us in a bit of a tricky situation in that it's a big cost. it's not a terribly large service area to distribute that cost amongst. There's also an existing debt that's relating to the wastewater treatment plant upgrades that were completed earlier this year. And so that's why you see one of the alternatives being proposed is to consolidate that debt with borrowing for that would be required for the outfall replacement. So it's really at this point it's you know, we're not in compliance with our permit. It's a sort of a legal and an environmental imperative that we do replace this outfall. And we've been in contact with the provincial staff that are overseeing these types of permits and our permit in particular, and they're aware of the situation and they're aware that we're working on it. They haven't come down and said, "Oh, this has to be done right away." They're sympathetic to our situation, that it's not something that can be done overnight, but we do have to be showing progress towards the ultimate solution. So that's what we wanted to really run by you today was the situation, what needs to be done, and what our options are for financing that work. And I don't know if Kristen wanted to say anything more about the alternatives in terms of the consolidation of the debt versus strictly borrowing straight for the outfall replacement itself.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I did put that option in there to look at the consolidation of the two debts. I think by taking that approach, we're going to minimize the parcel tax impact to homeowners, being respectful of everybody's ability to pay. We want to ensure that that we don't all of a sudden increase parcel taxes by 100% in 1 year kind of thing. So that is an alternative that we're considering and we're looking at, and we think that would probably provide some financial flexibility for people. Again, doing it by a parcel tax means that it's on the tax roll for homeowners who are eligible to defer. That gives them some financial flexibility as well. What I did want to say is we don't have any firm numbers yet or any kind of formula for allocating the distribution of a parcel tax, because we are looking at trying to be as equitable as we can and coming up with a formula that sort of parcel taxes are very rigid. They don't give us a lot of flexibility in the way that we apply them. So we are trying to use all the means available to us within that parcel tax legislation to enable that distribution to be made a little bit more proportionately in accordance with demand on the sewer. So we haven't finished that work yet. We have a team working on it. Liam, Patrick, myself, and Annette as well are all putting our heads together to come up with something that is a little bit creative, a little bit innovative, and a little bit more equitable to come up with a fair distribution amount. So I'm sorry we don't have that yet. We're also doing that in conjunction with the work on the DCCs that we're working on for the DCC bylaw. So I wish I had more information for you at this point about what a parcel tax will look like. At this point, the only sort of options that we are able to put out there is 2 separate parcel taxes in satisfying the initial debt plus the new one, or a consolidation of one, which would mean a lower parcel tax, but over a longer period of time. So really, we're just kind of highlighting this and flagging this for you, that we will be coming back in a little bit when we've got our numbers a little bit more refined, and we will be able to present more information at that time. So
I got a couple questions. Kristen, when you reference the the equitableness of it, are you talking about residential versus commercial? What are you considering as far as that?
Yeah, we're trying to come up with a parcel tax to somehow kind of replicate a distribution of tax based on like a volume that is input into the sewer to ensure that users who use more outflow, who produce more outflow, are paying a higher percentage of the cost.
So the outflow is measured based on the inflow of water, is it? Is that, there's no measurement of outflow, so
No, there's no.
how do you, I mean, it goes back to the same question when it comes to water usage versus sewer use. There is a difference there. But you're tying it to water use then.
Like I said, we're not able to do it that way. We do have a lot of restrictions within the parcel tax framework that we work, but we're trying to do something that will replicate that. We're trying to come up with, we're consulting with the ministry to see what our options are about trying to somehow replicate through a parcel tax. It's not going to be 100%. We're not going to be able to replicate it perfectly, but something that will more equitably distribute the cost based on a reflection of what what a very high consumer demand on the sewer users versus a very low impact demand on the sewer. We're trying to create something a little bit more equitable.
How does this fit in with the sort of committee of the whole funding phase 2 of the sewer alternative funding models that look beyond the Cove specifically? How does that all tie in?
Liam might be able to speak to that a little bit. Like I said, we have been doing a significant amount of work on the DCC, the proposed DCC. So that's where we are hoping to bring the potential development community together to review that and get some feedback from them on the work that we've done. Did you want to add to that, Liam?
Sure. I just want to get clarification from Cooper. You mentioned like the committee of the whole. I think that's referencing to a request that Glenn put out about getting folks together.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember last time. So what I remember from last time is that there's $7 million that has to be found to actually do the full sewer upgrades. But maybe a first question, is this 1.2 million part of that old 7 million number, or this is on top of?
On top.
Assuming it was on top of, because that would be too good to be true if it was underneath. But okay, so then we had talked about, because there was so much controversy in how the upgrades were funded the first time around, but the fact that the Cove provides amenities for the whole island, was there a way to more equitably spread costs, not just on owners in the Cove, because other people receive benefits from the services the Cove provides? And that's the DCC, I guess?
Not necessarily. So what you're alluding to is this notion that the general tax fund or the general tax base of the entire island helps offset the cost of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, which really gets into sticky territory very fast and becomes very political very fast.
Yep.
And there's multiple ways to address that challenge, like that financial challenge. And so, we've looked at that and sort of, conceptually thought, well, there might be an argument to say that there are some beneficial uses to all residents on Bowen to having that sewer system upgraded. And that could be contemplated through a policy that we're working on. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but we're calling it basically the capital contribution policy, which would look at where there were extraordinary circumstances where infrastructure that is typically confined to a local service area, like the sewer, but that infrastructure yielded benefits to the broader community. Therefore, council could legitimately provide some funding to that local service area infrastructure from the general pot.
I mean,
So
I understand how controversial that is, but it
So
seems
the
like,
conventional way of funding infrastructure within a local service area is that it is funded from the local service area. And then what some people will say, and we're hearing it already from others, that if you are thinking that, well, the businesses that are providing services in the Cove are benefiting all the island residents because people benefit from those businesses, then you should adequately be charging those businesses. And so you shouldn't be charging residents outside of the Cove who are dependent on their own sewer systems and their own, whatever that might be, for a system that they don't directly benefit from. But if they are yielding benefits from businesses in the Cove, well, then those businesses should be charged an adequate rate. And then those costs that those businesses incur become reflective in the costs that they pass on to their customers. So that'll be a key argument against the notion of trying to use general revenue to support the project. So we're alive to that, and we're alive to, you know, there's many arguments pro and against, and effectively what we need to do is develop that policy in parallel with the DCC, which would identify the development cost charge rates and bring them together to council for consideration. And they would come to this committee too, and they'd go to the finance committee. And but before we even bring them to council and committee, for the DCC itself, what we need to do is have a meeting with the development community in the sewer area. And so that would be a handful of folks. Some of them are on this call. And we would have like a very frank discussion with them about, okay, this is how we've done the math. This is how we see the charges falling out across different sectors. So it won't be strictly residential and commercial. It'll be residential, which will be broken down into detached single family, multiplex, seniors, rental. There'll be various categories within residential. And the residential side of it is a little easier to calculate because it's really based on a per capita demand. And then we shift into the what's called the ICI, or the industrial, commercial, institutional. And so that's everything else. And those ones get trickier because it's hard to get a population equivalency from a pub or from a bookstore or a clinic. And so what we're doing is a lot of analysis on the existing demand from the existing user base and looking at the floor area and looking at, you know, what that outcome looks like, so we can derive probably it's like going to be a per square meter charge, but a differential rate for what we would call hospitality versus like retail versus institutional, which would be like a school or a clinic or something. And those deriving those rates is taking a little more effort than we initially thought. And so we want to get those as best as we possibly can figured out. And then we bring that forward to that development community, get their input, bring that forward to the committees, and then bring that forward to council.
I wonder if I could just add to Liam, just kind of backing it up to the notion of general funds for wastewater treatment plant projects. I think it's also important to differentiate between a replacement of existing versus an investment in new or expanded capacity. And just like the Blue Water people have been, are expected to fund the $3.1 million replacement of their existing, and the Tunstall Bay people are expected to pay the $800,000 replacement of their tank, that the replacement of existing infrastructure should be allocated only to the users within the local service area. We did differentiate in the report the marginal cost to create capacity for future. And we would, of course, acknowledge that that should be captured through a latecomers agreement. Anybody joining subsequent to the completion of that project should be required to pay a pro rata share of that expanded development. So that would be recaptured from future users. But replacement of like for like, in any case, that will be my recommendation in that financing policy, that is attributable to existing users.
I think that makes sense. I was just like, we had talked about affordable housing before and how most of the zoning for that would fall into this catchment area as far as I understand. And affordable housing is a, hot button topic across all the committees doing everything, but that falls into the Cove and benefits everyone. So just making sure that's still on everyone's radar.
They would, and were those to come to fruition, then they would be subject to that debt financing charge, and they would help and contribute to, and that would thereby reduce the cost being paid by everybody else when they come on.
Well, it also limits the ability, I think, for it to be called affordable when there are these kind of charges on the development side of it. Not, there's a lot of things that come to mind with the different equations that are being thrown around. With tying it to floor space, for example, Liam, like it would be hard to understand from someone like Kelly Kono's point of view, who's got a dance studio, versus like what does BC Ferries pay for public washrooms? I mean, the public washrooms at the BC Ferries, I don't know what their bill is for it, but it's an amenity to the community. And right now, with such limited facilities for public use, I would argue that the pub is a public washroom at some point, as is the Snug, as is Docks, as is, we're paying for that. So it's a very, very challenging equation to kind of sort through, to understand. But I do stand by the position that the Cove is used by the entire community, as is all our visitors use the Cove and things like that. So it's a challenging one for sure. And I'll be paying close attention to how we come to these figures. I don't know what the solution is, but I do encourage us to try and get the stakeholders to the table sooner rather than later. There's some rather large players that really we need buy-in from, when it comes to the development at the top of Case Hill and things like that. And there's the amount of residential that could potentially just say, the hell with it, I'm going to put in a septic field, and take them out of the equation, and it just adds to the bill for everybody else. We really need to know who's on board with the formula. So yeah, I just leave it out there.
Is 50 centimeters enough for the next 35 years? Like, I just like the base, but like if it's a 200 millimeter pipe or a 250 millimeter pipe, are we confident that anticipates the demand? Or in like 5 years, are we going to be saying, gosh, I wish we put in a 350 millimeter pipe?
This was what was recommended in the preliminary design report. I mean, certainly when we get into detailed design, and we can't really do that without funds, we would that would be the first thing that we would revisit. But that's the current advice that we have based on long-term projections and what capacity of different pipe sizes would be.
I mean, I'm just conscious, this is my second sewer committee meeting. And the first meeting was looking at a $7 million price that was from a design study 2 years prior. And then this has popped up out of nowhere. And presumably someone knew 2 years ago that the outflow was 35 years old too. So I know this has to get fixed. I just want to fix it in a way that's, solves the problem.
Right.
It's hard to know what was causing some of the problems with the actual outfall. I mean, so where it's located is also quite a busy harbor. And that can create its own challenges too. So, and I mean, a lot of the challenges that we're facing are challenges or infrastructure that was built decades ago. And we don't know exactly what the quality of the installation was, sometimes even the actual material. And sometimes we're even challenged with knowing where that infrastructure is. With the sewer system, we're actually got a better handle on that than with some of our drinking water systems, which were truly cottage country infrastructure, where people were literally just laying pipe wherever they felt they could or would, and you know, illegally tapping into the municipal lanes and things like that.
Yeah, I think to Cooper's point, though, none of that should come as a surprise to us on an island like Bowen, that we're dealing with old infrastructure and questionable installations and all that kind of stuff, and it should be anticipated. And I was quite surprised as well to know that we were looking at this long-term second phase massive rebuild of the Snug Cove sewer system, and this outfall wasn't part of the equation. Or
it was part of the equation. Yeah. It's always been part of the equation.
But it's not part of the.
It was never anticipated that it would all of a sudden be an emergency.
But it wasn't part of the 7 million. So
it is part of the 7 million.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are looking at reducing that number by doing this repair now.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, but but the other big caveat, as most of you know, because you're builders, I mean, the construction environment is horrific right now. And so the escalation alone is really difficult.
Not a whole lot of lumber under the ocean.
No. But I want to just say something that I think you probably all understand, but I just want to put it out there. I mean, like, when we're thinking about this project from implementation perspective, we're going to be extremely challenged with the financing. Right. So if we're saying that, okay, let's just pick a arbitrary number, let's call it $7 million. That's what we've been batting around. And we say, okay, well, the bulk of that upgrade is for new development, then new development must pay for that upgrade. And so if we're saying that, you know, 75% or 80% of that upgrade is for new development, then we need the developers of that new development to finance that. The likelihood that we're going to get development to come forward with that kind of upfront financing is really low, to be really frank and honest. So that means, well, where do we get that money from?
But what was just described, though, Liam, is that this is not a upgrade to necessarily only accommodate future growth. It's an upgrade to replace aging infrastructure, and I think that is the key. Is has been identified. This is an older system, and it's installed questionably. I think we can look at it as regardless of future growth or not, we need to deal with the old infrastructure, and that's a local area issue.
Yeah, I don't know if we're not talking about replacing the existing cells and the existing infrastructure. This is strictly, what we've been talking about is strictly in an expansion.
The outfall's not. I think that's the
outfall.
That's right. I agree with you 100% there. But the plant itself is strictly expansion. Like, there may be some elements once you get into it and we really zero in on the details. We can there's definitely elements that can be considered renewal and replacement due to aging condition. I agree with you there, but the bulk of it is expansion for new development.
So how close do you think we are to establishing a formula or some sort of proposal that can be put forward for consideration? Because it does seem like there's a lot of questionable things and a lot of things to consider, but we have to at least be able to make the proposal and give some people some solid understanding. From a developer's point of view, and I don't even call myself a developer, but I got a piece of land next door that could be ideally suited for a community amendment, being affordable housing. Well, without solid numbers, there's just no way for me to ever understand whether that could ever possibly even be a solution for the community. And I think that we need to kind of narrow in on that.
Right. And what I'm hopeful for is that in the new year, early in the new year, that we're able to hold that meeting with the development community. That would be our first next step, is to basically clean up the math and the spreadsheets so that they're discernible by other people. You wouldn't want to see it right now. And then have that discussion about, okay, this is how much we anticipate the project costing. This is how much we anticipate is needed for new development versus existing development. And this is how much we think each different sector of users would contribute through DCC charges or the like. So I'm hoping to be able to do that early in the new year.
Liam, how many parcels are in the service area?
I think there's like 94 residential and about 20 or 30 commercial. Is that something in that ballpark?
I had 120 as a total number, so around that, yes, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe we're at 125 now.
Thanks. And there's talk of expansion with this sewer upgrade. What are we looking at beyond 120 with that?
I don't have a good number in terms of net new connections. We've been operating mostly in population equivalencies. And so what this 20-year growth expansion project is contemplating is somewhere in the ballpark of adding up to 350 people equivalency in volume. So that 300, and what we use is for a residential, single detached residential, we use 2.5 people per connection. So that would be equivalent to 140 residential connections. That's not to say that whole expansion is for residents.
It's closer to 450, the 20-year growth.
Okay.
And it's not quite a doubling, but pretty close.
Is that
You have an
assuming
equation,
greater?
So you have an equation for like a residential property equates to X number of people. Like, is that what?
2.5. Yeah, for a single detached, but for multiplex, it's more like 2. And then for apartments, more like 1.5. And then for seniors, it's pretty much 1. Like if you were going to do a seniors housing complex like Snug, Cove House or something.
Okay. Do we have any other questions about that right now?
Basically, the only choice so we have to do this because we're like not in compliance pumping raw sewage into the middle of Snug Cove. So the only choices are, do we combine the loans or do we keep the loans separate? That's basically what's on the table right now.
Just want to clarify, it's not raw sewage. We're not doing that. We're not like Victoria used to be.
Okay.
Treated
But the only choices to the committee right now are 2 loans or 1 loan.
Yeah, that's where we're.
Kristen's that's right. Those are the alternatives that we've put forward. I know they're both equally bitter and not particularly nice choices to choose between. I understand that you're going to want to see harder, firmer estimates about what that long-term cost is going to be. So I suppose what I'm looking for is some some agreement that consolidating the loans is effectively probably an easier cash management strategy for people to handle, and looking for support on that from committee members. Yeah, thanks.
Is there any input from the finance committee on this?
They haven't looked at it yet. We haven't, but when we get a distribution and allocation formula, it will go to them. I don't have anything
Oh, on the
hard and fast to
consolidation,
look at them.
on the consolidation of the loans.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But it's basically longer tenure and lower interest if they are consolidated.
That's yes.
So
And
this seems like a no-brainer.
Well, yeah, it makes for lower payments, but you ultimately do pay more interest over time.
Yeah.
And it locks up the one of the things that we're tasked with doing is looking at the municipal impacts of the municipality in the near and long term. And the longer we lock up debt, the more it constrains future populations' abilities to borrow and take on debt. So we're always cognizant of that. And Kristen and I are trying our very best to operate the municipality in such a fashion that we don't exceed 50 or at least at most 60% of our liability servicing limits, because we really don't want to maximize our liability, our debt ceiling. We want to stay in around 50 to 60% mark, because you always want to leave room for unknowns.
yeah,
And so even though this is the local service area and it's confined to just this area, it impacts our debt servicing ability across the entire municipality.
So I would stress that I generally would, refer to Kristen's recommendations as being a good way to go from a financial point of view, and when it comes to loans and consolidation and things like that. The big thing that I have concern over is how, in consolidating the loans, it becomes then a parcel tax, and the discussion in regards to how to creatively adjust the parcel tax in a equitable way is unclear. And I would stop short of supporting the recommendation of combining the two loans without better clarity on that.
yep.
Good point.
Yeah. And again, what we're trying to do there is really look at like where are the big users of the system and ensure that we're capturing that in the parcel tax. And the legislative framework for parcel taxes is incredibly limited. It's probably the most regressive form of tax, more regressive than property tax. So really like it, the classic parcel tax is like you've got one property, you pay this, every property pays the same amount. And it doesn't matter whether you're like a really huge property with tons of use or whether you're a tiny property with next to no use, or the reverse. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, okay, well, is there a better way that we can do it so that it's more equitable to ensure that the heavy users are paying their fair share and we're not overly burdening the light users?
Is there a way to pick up, when it comes to residential, is there a way to pick up short-term accommodation or you just put residential into one category and then figure out does heavy users include residential, I guess is my question.
Not so much. Like when we look at the residential use as a sector, and we can pull that out and look at like, okay, well, what is their average annual demand? It's considerably lower than any of the commercial or institutional sectors. There definitely are some non-residential users that are lower than residential users, but they're few and far between. Like the TELUS building at the Four Corners, right? Like that, they use a bit of water, but not much, right? And so but Glenn, it is a really good question that we want to look at is whether like like, is there a way to capture that, right? The secondary suites, the short-term vacation rentals, those type of things, like, the ways to capture that. Or that become a really challenging exercise without much return for the amount of effort required.
But we have talked about it and it is on our radar and we are looking at considering ways to capture that information too. I mean, we do have business license records and things like that. So it is part of the conversation.
What would be harder to capture is like the secondary suites that, you know, were perhaps built. We're never going to be able to capture them all, right? Like, so the business licensed ones, those are easier to identify. Newer builds are easier to identify.
Do you have any sense, this is maybe slightly off topic, but since we're measuring inflow instead of outflow to actually measure outflow, like irrigation and non-sewer related usage, do you have any sense of that? Which I would imagine is higher on the residential side than the commercial side.
So we do allow for people to have a second meter, so that you can, and then that can be deducted. So you would have like your property meter where you're at the property line where this is all the water going into your property, and then you'd have a second meter at your home, which would be, this is all the
I think we should make sure we're in a position to communicate that process, because I have a strong supposition that if you tell people their taxes are going to go up a whole lot, you're going to have a whole lot more people wanting to split those two things.
Yeah.
And so we, you know, especially for most of the business side of things, and Glenn, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but depending on your business, you may not really use much water outside, right? Like, it's probably mostly all indoor.
Yes, correct for me. I don't know the situation. I mean, for example, down at the marina, they use probably a tremendous amount of water outside. I would assume that they probably have a secondary meter, and I don't know.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do.
And we do that math, which we need to look a little more closely at, but.
And our apartment building just got a massive water bill, and we are looking at a separate meter for our landscaping right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as those plants are getting established, they're pretty thirsty. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. We've just learned something with that last water bill. Yeah.
Everybody's was higher than typical expected. We like Patrick said, we have $50,000 of unexpected operating costs in the sewer budget this year because of this outfall work. So with zero in reserve, we can't run a deficit. We had to increase the rate for that. Yeah, we had to make sure that we are not going to run into deficit this year. So
It was noticed.
Yes,
Yeah. So is that a one-time increase there, or are we going back?
well, I mean, we'll work on, you know, I mean,
One time every time, David.
Yeah.
One time
Yeah.
every time.
but
Now
I,
it goes back
but
down.
it wasn't, I just want, you know, it wasn't something that only businesses
Okay.
experienced or multifamily experienced. Homeowners, Catesville throughout the sewer district experienced, some of them, you know,
Yeah.
experienced.
I thought I had a leak in my irrigation. I don't. So
Mhm.
Just out of curiosity, because I want to make sure that I've got my facts straight, but the one and only public washroom that services the community is managed by BC Ferries, and it is part of our sewer system.
Yep.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would argue that the library is public.
Is public as in it's part of the sewer system.
Public washroom.
Oh, okay, public washroom. Well, I would argue so is the pub. I mean, that's what I keep trying to get at as well. Is you know, we're getting to the point now where people are going to start really paying attention, and you know, you don't want to walk down Trunk Road and see every business with a big sign on their door saying no public washrooms, because right now there's a lot of there's a lot of people that, you know, we do accommodate. We have to accommodate, you know, and that's just the way it is. And there doesn't seem to be any solution for public washrooms. I don't see anything coming in anytime soon. So you know, all these things have to be taken into consideration, and I don't know how you do it. But as I say, it's you know, the only tools that business owners now have is to really seriously restrict usage in any way possible. So
Yeah, and I mean, public washrooms it's been a hot, or I don't know about hot, but it's been a topic for a long time, right? And it sure feels like with the volume of traffic in the Cove, it may be worth revisiting again. One of the big challenges for us as a municipality is like, well, where do you even put them? Like our land on Bowen in general is pretty limited from a public land perspective.
Say if you provided some relief on this proposed parcel tax to business owners, they might be more willing to keep the door open.
Yeah, I think from a cost perspective, I don't know that the demand from like the public use of washrooms is what's gonna really save the costs on this project. If you actually, you know, look at you're talking about a $7 million project, I think. Shaving off a little bit of toilet use.
I get that. It's not gonna save the world, but from small business perspective, nickels and dimes is your profit, and that's where they look for. If they're saving nickels and dimes, they're increasing their profit, and that's what people will do. So I'm just suggesting that it's the only tool in the toolbox is to limit the use of public washrooms. You know, right now there's no pressure on the municipality to provide public facilities because nobody's screaming loud enough. But if nobody has any place to go to the bathroom, there might be more pressure on that kind of thing. So, you know, it's just a matter of working with the business community and appreciating that they do provide this service, and understanding that although it's not a huge value, the more pressure that's put on the business community, the more they're going to react.
Oh, I hear you loud and clear, Glenn, and I totally agree. And I think in reality, the billing structure for all of our utilities have been pretty lenient, and especially to the business community when you look at it more closely in terms of what the rates are and what the who gets captured when and where. The municipality has been pretty lenient. You know, I live in a private system where my water and sewer is operated by utilities that are governed and by oversight from the Comptroller of Water Rights, who mandates a requirement for full cost accounting inclusive of capital renewal and replacement. And so, you know, the rates I pay are significantly higher than any other publicly funded rate on the island. So the municipality has been pretty lenient. I don't know if I use the word lenient, but you know, the rates in and around the Cove have been low for many years.
So before we move on, I guess there is a recommendation. I guess I can read it out. We can kind of take a look at this as far as what we want to do.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it a good size?
Yeah. You want me to read it out here? Whereas the estimated cost to replace the wastewater treatment plant outfall is approximately 1.2 million, and whereas the Snug Cove sewer local service area is indebted to the general fund for approximately 575,000, therefore it be resolved that the Snug Cove Sewer Local Advisory Committee recommend that council direct staff to initiate a loan authorization bypass process for $1.8 million to fund construction of a replacement outfall and consolidate existing debt into a single annual parcel tax. Personally, I would be supportive of recommending that council direct staff to initiate a loan authorization process to fund construction of a replacement outfall but I'm not sure about the consolidating existing debt yet. That's kind of where I'm at. Although I really like the idea of it, and I think Kristen's got some great suggestions and recommendations, and it might be my preference to go that route. I just need to better understand how that parcel tax will be. It's not a typical parcel tax, I guess. It's going to be adjusted in some way. Any other comments or thoughts on that?
So, I mean, you can amend any kind of recommendation. I guess what can be agreed upon is that the municipality should move forward with initiating a loan process to fund the cost of the replacement project. Now, whether we go for 1.2 million or we go with 1.8 million is not something you're prepared to recommend at this time. So
Does it make a difference? Like, is it the concern? So I think everyone cares about how the parcel tax is ultimately allocated, but does it
Yeah.
make a difference right now if it's 1.2 or 1.8? Because it's going to come through a parcel tax one way or another, right? So
right.
it's more that we want to have feedback on the allocation algorithm whenever
But
that
in
happens.
theory, you agree that consolidation is a good idea, but how you allocate the parcel tax repayment is not something that, and we haven't put anything in front of you. At this
Yeah,
point.
I don't have a problem with the resolution as it was put, under the assumption that how it gets allocated is phase 2 later.
Right.
My understanding, Chris, and I guess just correct me if I'm wrong, is the consolidation of the two debts would make it a parcel to currently we have a parcel tax to cover the 770 for the 575,000.
Yeah, that's what's remaining.
We want to borrow the 1.8 to and make it all one parcel tax. But if we kept the 575 as a parcel tax and we borrowed the 1.2, would that be another parcel tax, or would that be a user, like what would fund that debt? Parcel tax?
Yes, there would be a new parcel tax, and the existing one, which I think is upwards of $700 right now, would also remain. So there would be.
Okay, so it's the consolidation goes from obviously from two parcel taxes down to one, but whatever, and I don't really understand, but whatever manipulation of this parcel tax as far as the equity of it would then affect both debts. Currently, the $575,000 parcel tax is an even split amongst users.
Yes.
So your concern, Glenn, is you're taking a fixed spread and maybe variabilizing it in a way that is unfair to large business owners.
I don't disagree that there could be or should be some adjustment based on usage and things like that. It's just we do not know exactly what's being proposed at this time. And that's the only challenge I have in supporting it, is that without knowing what that looks like, you know, so if we could put some wording in there that would allow us to review what the parcel tax formula would look like. I don't know if I'm making this more complicated than it is. I fully support the combining of the loans and the directing council to initiate a loan authorization bypass for 1.8 million. But are we able to get that information, Kristen, before, you know, like
If I could just have a minute, I'm just trying to draft something here. Sorry. So I'm thinking. Okay. So I'm thinking that we need to expand on the whereases a little bit, Steph. And I've got, whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Service Area supports in principle the consolidation of the two debts. And then I've got, be it resolved that a process of public consultation be undertaken in respect of the allocation formula, before, or prior to the adoption of any parcel tax.
Right, sorry, after,
Yeah, I'll just finish writing, 1 second. Okay, so. Thanks. Whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Service Area supports in principle the consolidation of two debts, be it resolved that a process of public consultation be undertaken in respect to the allocation, in respect, be it resolved that public consultation be undertaken in respect of the allocation formula prior to adoption of a new parcel tax. Sorry, I hate wordsmithing on the fly, but I understand exactly what the
that would
concerns of
go
the committee.
down.
So where's the estimated cost for place? And maybe that second, be it resolved, be
Mhm.
underneath the other one and be it further resolved.
Go here.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas the principle therefore be it resolved, and be it further resolved that recommend. Okay,
Sorry, I just think that therefore be it resolved that a process of public consultation be undertaken is the second,
Oh, sorry.
is the second resolution.
okay.
Yeah.
Right, oh, right, where we had this. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, I think we're getting there. Sorry, you guys, it's really
Don't apologize, Kristen. Thank you.
clumsy.
Appreciate
You're
that.
loving it, Kristen. I can tell. Okay, so whereas replacement cost indebted to support in principle, do you want to say something better around two debts?
Yeah,
The book of two flues.
yeah. Whereas the supports in principle, the consolidation of the two
Existing and. Oh, yeah, sorry.
of the two debts. I mean, it's okay.
Existing and newly acquired.
And yeah. It well, not new, it's not
It's
acquired
not
yet.
accountable now.
And existing,
be?
just put and new debt, don't put acquired. Okay, therefore be it resolved. Yeah. Okay, I think that is okay. Can you review that, please,
I would
Chair?
add, if I can, the whereas the committee supports in principle the consolidation of the existing and new debts. You could add on to that into a single annual parcel tax. So that it's clear that
Oh,
that's
good.
support.
Yes,
It's
that's
just
really
the
good.
structure of the parcel tax that
Yeah.
is in.
That's really good.
So that comes up again here. It's fine, repeating the same word.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't need and at the very end.
And then.
Okay,
David, did you comment?
No, that works.
Is it all good? Do you guys want me to read it out, or is it, are we covered here? Let me just run through it and then we can, unless there's any other comments, I'll read it off and we can have the vote.
Yeah.
Whereas the estimated cost to replace the wastewater treatment plant outfall is approximately 1.2 million, and whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Service Area is indebted to the general fund for approximately 575,000, and whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Service Area supports in principle the consolidation of the existing and new debt into a single annual parcel tax. Therefore, be it resolved that the Snug Cove Sewer Local Advisory Committee recommends that council direct staff to initiate a loan authorization by law process for $1.8 million to fund construction of a replacement outfall and consolidate existing debt into a single annual parcel tax. Be it further resolved that a process of public consultation be undertaken in respect to the allocation formula prior to the adoption of a new parcel tax.
Do you want to say something about there being an existing parcel tax, like right here? Because we're talking about consolidating debt without having said there already is a parcel tax.
you could put,
Like which is being funded.
yeah,
Is funded the right word? Is being paid down?
repaid, you can debt is being repaid through an annual parcel tax. And you can say the amount of it. I don't have the amount fresh in my head, but we could put that in.
Currently being
Find it.
repaid.
I could find it.
713.
How much he's got his bill right there?
No, that's what's in the notes from the last meeting.
Oh,
So
I will
assuming
double
it didn't
check
change
that.
from the minutes we just approved at 713.
I can look up a bill, somebody's bill. Cooper, what's your last name? I'll look up your bill.
McGuire,
Thank you.
MCGUIRE.
yeah, you don't want to use the committee coordinator's opinion on sewer financing as a
Yeah,
paper trail.
713.
Oh, yay.
Thank you.
I generally try to avoid that level of specificity in minutes, but okay. Who wants to read it again? Or you're fine with that amendment?
What you've added there? Okay. You want me to read the whole thing again or just that paragraph?
Read it one more time, make sure you're all happy with it.
Okay. Whereas the estimated cost to replace the wastewater treatment plant outfall is approximately 1.2 million, and whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Service Area is indebted to the general fund for approximately 575,000, which is currently being repaid through an annual parcel tax of $713. And whereas the Snug Cove Sewer Local Advisory Committee supports in principle the consolidation of the existing and new debt into a single annual parcel tax. Therefore, be it resolved that the Snug Cove Sewer Local Advisory Committee recommend that council direct staff to initiate a loan authorization bylaw process for $1.8 million to fund construction of a replacement outfall and consolidate existing debt into a single annual parcel tax. And be it further resolved that a process of public consultation be undertaken in respect to the allocation formula prior to the adoption of a new parcel tax.
Good work.
All right.
Yeah.
Does someone want to make a motion on that?
He's moving it.
I would push it forward.
Okay, Cooper. Seconder. I'll second it.
Second.
There we go. There's a few.
Everyone to it. All right.
Giving it to Cam.
Okay, so we will call the vote then. All in favor? That's everyone. Carried. Okay. Thanks for that, Steph and Kristen.
Thank you.
Now, we did have a couple other things to cover off. If we can. Do we still have Patrick on the, yeah, still there. So the updates that we've requested, just in regards to the 5.1, I know that there has been a lot of work that's been done on inflow and infiltration, and we'd like to get an update on that. And there was reference to a study or something that's been done to indicate whether capacity has been gained by that work, and we're just curious to know what that that looks like right now. Where are we at with the results of the phase 1 work that was done?
We had Urban Systems review the capacity following the completion of the phase 1 work to determine, it was primarily looking at the properties on Foxglove Lane, which are multifamily zone properties that are with lots that are too small to support septic fields. They were essentially out of luck without an ability to connect to the sewer. And so there was a review to determine whether the combination of adding the equalization tank and the I&I work that was done on rehabilitating the manholes that were identified as being leaking was adequate to accommodate those properties. And they did determine that that it was something that they could support. Adding it was essentially 5 more duplex properties to the system, but that there was still a risk of exceedance of capacity. There's no way to it's no way to be firm on that, to say, okay, there's no way that that this plant can accept this much capacity and there's no risk of exceedance. It's all exercise in risk management, and they felt it was a reasonable and manageable risk to take on. Included in that conclusion is that it is at capacity. There isn't an ability to take on any more load to the system.
Has there been any episodes of going over capacity? I know that there was one, I think back in 2018, that was identified, and I don't know if there's been any other episodes in which we have exceeded our capacity. Has there been any?
There has been, well, there was prior to, do you mean before or after the phase 1 work? As there was in 2021.
There was are they all tied to rain events? Are they all being tied to rain events at this point?
Yeah, they were all linked to periods of very wet weather. And so it occurred 3 times in I believe 3 times in 2021 before we got into the plant upgrades. And since the plant upgrades have been completed, there was one episode where if the new tank wasn't there, there would have been an overflow of the system. So it was essentially doing what it's designed to do.
So these events of being over capacity are occurring during rain events. So they're occurring during the winter time. So even in our peak season, tourist seasons, we're not going over the capacity of the plant at this point.
Not during there hasn't been during the summer, no.
Okay, so I guess that was my question. If we have identified that this is directly related to heavy rain events, the inflow and infiltration work is really key to a lot of this. Is that something that, I assume it's ongoing, and you know, every system I'm sure has this challenge, but it seems that we have significant amounts of challenge with our rain events. Is there anything that we can identify aside from upgrading the plant at this point to avoid these overcapacity issues?
Well, just sort of to address one comment that you made there in terms of our I&I being more significant is not really the case. We aren't above what the regional averages are in terms of when you compare average flows to peak flows. That's kind of one of the key measures of how much inflow and infiltration the system is getting. We are sort of consistent with what other municipalities experience in that regard. In terms of what can we do, we do have, I mean, we have addressed the low-hanging fruit in terms of looking at the visible assets, the manholes in the collection system, identifying the ones that are obviously leaking. There are a few more that we're moving forward to address because there's, you know, suspected leaking occurring at high groundwater periods. When you get beyond those visible assets, then it becomes a lot more challenging and expensive. So you have to, looking at our own pipes, sending cameras through would be a way to identify whether we've got cracked pipes or you know, issues with the pipes in the collection system. Studies have shown that in general the I&I component is something like 60% on average is from individual properties, either through improperly connected drainage pipes or roof rain leaders connected to a sanitary system, or the drainage or the sanitary pipes that were put in place as part of the individual house development were, you know, were not done, were poorly done, or are broken or cracked. And so that's a little more difficult to get at, and it would involve, I suppose, you know, going through, you could go through door to door and do dye tests to, you know, determine if there's unauthorized connections. I'm not sure how you get at the
So I mean, I just want to get to the point where it's kind of, I mean, all this work is we can certainly chip away at it, but is there any scenario in your mind that any of this work would get us to the point where capacity could be identified enough to allow some projects to move forward, or is it just this moratorium on building permits in the Cove is just going to be in place until phase 2 is completed? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel for us? Because I see phase 2 as being a very, very, very long-term project, and I think that we need to face reality with this as far as funding and initiatives to get to that point. So, are we looking at this period of years before anything can happen in the Cove, or is there an opportunity to identify somehow, you know, people who have invested in properties and things like that to be able to go ahead and build?
I'm not sure that we are. I think unfortunately we are looking at needing a capacity upgrade in order to facilitate that. You know, if we are able to make some gains on the, you know, unless we were to find something really significant, like there's, you know, this whole area here has been draining into the wastewater system and we're able to quantify it somehow. It's really hard to see how we can translate, you know, any additional work on I&I into something quantifiable that would allow us to say, well, this project here can move forward. Well, this project here, but not these over here. It's probably more additional gains in that area are reducing the risk that the current load we have on the system is going to be too much for the system. It's probably not what you want to hear, but that's.
I don't think it's what anybody wants to hear. You know, this is kind of the really jagged pill that we have to swallow here. And it's you know, I know that everybody understands the situation. I just wish there was a better path or a clearer path to get to completion. The money is obviously a big factor, and the longer this project gets pushed back or delayed or shoved aside, the number gets bigger. We all know that. And you know, it's very, very disheartening to see this, because this is the future of our community, right? This is what we're talking about. So
Yeah, and
I mean, I can only say it, but there has to be council initiative to drive this forward, and there has to be a path to the funding. I get it all. I just feel like it's almost a too hot to handle type of topic where people don't want to push this forward sometimes. But anyways, I you know, I think everybody knows.
well, if we're going forward with an OCP update, and you know, if coming out of that process, additional development and densification and things happening in the Cove is an integral part of that, you would think that would have to force the issue. It's not really possible to have a plan that's not implementable, right? It's not, that doesn't have a foundation in the reality of what servicing landscape is.
I understand. It's just following the process of an OCP. We are a long ways down the road from addressing this as well, because that process is a long time too.
It feels to me like the lack of sewer capacity is going to impact the OCP, not the other way around.
It might, yeah. And maybe we have to do some more work to look at, you know, a feasible approach to upgrades. You know, being able to add some capacity. It's less efficient to do projects in that way, but just given the realities of the funding challenges.
Is there anything that like pre-processing that a larger building could do or something, so what it's passing to our system increases capacity? Like, are there any technologies that a larger building could install that means that what it's providing can be more easily processed by the existing plant?
I'm sure there are. But I guess the problem is that the limiting factor is the volume itself, as opposed to the strength of the wastewater.
That
you
is
know,
the issue. Like, it's not like if you were given slightly less raw sewage that the capacity goes up. It's literally just volume.
Volume. Yeah.
It is, yeah, it is in the volume in the wetter seasons. If it was a situation where it was, you know, the BOD load, or like the strength of the wastewater in the summertime, then those types of solutions would you know, would have a lot more potential to bear fruit. But
I think clearly the summertime is experiencing lower flows than the wintertime into this. It's clearly not something that we can adjust on our own, I think, to fix anything. That's a Mother Nature issue. Yeah. Listen, I'm just conscious of the time, so I want to be just keep us moving forward. The last point on 5.1 is, I believe we've covered with Liam on board, which was the status update on the funding model for the stakeholder committee at the whole. And I do believe we've addressed that. Is there any other questions in regards to this section on the updates from anybody?
I have one. And that is just another piece of work that that we are going to be looking at, and that is around a maintenance requirement for grease trap maintenance, that kind of thing. So there are many jurisdictions that have a requirement within their operating bylaw that requires that hospitality owners undertake regular program of maintenance for the grease trap, and that's of course to reduce the you know, those urgent situations where it gets plugged up and we have to send crews out right away to go and fix that. It really increases maintenance costs over time. So as any part of any kind of review of that bylaw, I just wanted to alert the committee just to let you know that we're going to be looking at adding something like that into the operations bylaw as well, which is a requirement requiring owners to keep records and have those records available for inspection were it requested by the superintendent.
Well, as someone who's probably at the top of the list for visiting to inspect, I would fully support a program like that. I know what Greece is like in public systems. So
Yep.
So new business. I'm going to just throw this into new business because I believe Cooper, you had something you wanted to address. Or I don't know if you've got your answers in regards to that yet.
No, I did. That's totally separate, and Patrick gave me what I needed to assuage the talking heads of Kate's Hill.
Okay, good. So any further items that we want to address at this time?
No.
No, all good. Next meeting, I think we'll just leave that as a TBD and move to adjourn. I think, is that good to go? Good. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn? There we go. David.
I would love to second that.
Cooper,
Just to
all in
wait.
favor of adjournment. All right. Thanks, Steph. Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.